It's a lockdown right here in Accra, Kumasi, a part of the central region that is just outside the precinct of the borders of Accra, where Kaswa and the other allied communities where we have the lockdown. We have deployment. Gifty and Pia had told you what had been happening since the deployment took place, post the deployment of the personnel, and how ordinary people feel. What we want to do is also tell you what the real picture is on the ground. And for the families, how do we make sure that they are doing what they have to do? Psychologically, how do they psych themselves up? And so we'll speak to experts, and if they are related public health concerns that could arise if we have everybody, cocooned together in chamber and hall, single rooms, etc. What could be the implications? So we'll speak to Amos Kevinanan, who is a guidance and counseling expert. And then also Dr. Polodro is a public health expert. Dr. Eugene Dodoi is a consultant psychiatrist and a lecturer with UHAS, that is the University of Health and Allied Sciences, that is based in the Volta Regional Capital. And I tell you, it is great education. But the evening of Sunday saw us interacting with the Minister for Information, Kujo Ponkroma, who also is a member of Parliament for Ofuansia Yerebi. That interaction took place with Emefa Apo. We will bring you a playback. And then when we have done or are done with that, we will come back and have some interactions with our notable experts, you as viewers, health practitioners on the front line, etc. But just watch this.
And I want to know how far is too far. I'm in Dansoma control. And can I move from control to Dansoma market? Or can I move from Dansoma control to Dansoma last stop? I just want to know how far is too far. Thank you.
Good evening, JoyNews. My name is Elikem. I would like to ask the Honorable Minister, supposing you are indoors during this stay-at-home era and you have an emergency like a running stomach, an injury from whatever you are doing, and you want to get access to a medical care, how then do you get it? And what are the required information to be given to the personnel out there for them to assist you? Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Edem. I'm speaking from Waja Sampafali. MFA, you are doing a wonderful job. Keep it up. I want to find out, please, for those of us who step out every morning to exercise, to take a walk, is this something we can still do within our
So that's how it goes. Some questions that you've sent in via video, you can keep yours still coming in. The Information Minister, Kojo Ponkroma, is on hand to answer all the questions for you. So we'll take the first set, a number of them. 2 weeks, what's next?
Let me, first of all, thank your viewers for sending in these questions. Indeed, earlier this morning, we did our best to answer a good number of the questions. We are also shortly going to make available some online platforms that people can ask more questions. But I really appreciate what you are doing. You would recall that prior to taking a decision to impose restrictions on some parts of the country, I think about in all about 40 MMDAs, the president took his time. And it's because the science tells us quite clearly that imposing restrictions only, without more, only delays spread if indeed you have elements of the virus in the community, and now we believe we do, and that by the time you lift it, then it continues. So imposing restrictions must be coupled with a more substantive action, because imposing restrictions only allows you to buy time, but you must do something with that time. Yes. So the substantive work which we are doing within this imposition period is enhanced surveillance and testing. Now, why are we doing enhanced surveillance and testing? Traditionally, many countries have been chasing the virus. So it's when you have a case, then you contact trace around the case, and then you try and resolve that one, and before you realize you have another case, you are chasing the virus. If we're going to be successful in this enterprise, we have to go ahead of the virus and rather go in search of it and contain and try and flatten the curve and literally deal with the situation. To do that, what we have to do is to restrict some movement, yes, which naturally delays spread, but gives us an opportunity to ramp up surveillance and testing of a number of cohorts. So in Ghana today, we have about 54 or so cases. If I just may check the data sets, we have about 54 or so cases that came out through the general surveillance. The general surveillance, 63 cases in the general surveillance, out of which 5 have unfortunately passed on, 2 have already recovered. So if you net of 63 minus 2 and then minus 5, those cases, each of those cases has a pool of contacts around it. Initially, the signs of COVID-19 suggested that it may take up to about 14 days before symptoms manifest. So the view was find them, observe them. If they show symptoms, then you can test. Because the view is that, and the view still holds today, that if the person is asymptomatic, when you test, you may not find anything, even if he's been exposed.
Yeah.
But now the decision that has been taken is that test all of those contacts, even as at now, and test a bit more, maybe twice or thrice during the period, even while they are isolated. So one of the first things we are doing is that for these 54 or so cases that are still active from the local surveillance, test them.
Okay.
So test the contacts of these 54.
Okay.
And the contacts, I think, over 1,000 persons who have been traced to these 54. So some have already been tested. But the idea is to complete this testing. They have a clear database of who these people are, where they traditionally, and I'll say where, because people have moved in the last 24 hours. I'll deal with that one. That's a first cohort. The second cohort is that in mandatory quarantine, out of 1,030, about 79 or so tested positive. Those persons also came into contact with a number of persons, even from the airport to mandatory quarantine. So all of the persons associated with these persons need to be tested.
So the port officials,
they need to be tested. We have a clear database of who these persons are.
We began doing that.
They have started the process, even including some of the government officials who've been involved in this. They have also started a testing process. But they gave us a clue. They gave us a proof of concept that when you have people contained in a place and you test the entire population, you can find those who have been exposed to the virus and, treat them. That's the way to deal with it. Therefore, we went back on the president's instructions that all of those who came in between the 3rd and when we started the mandatory quarantine, we have to examine that pool. When they put the numbers together, when they examined all the flight manifests, about 400 flights or so, it was about 34,000. And then the science led us to do some elimination. There were those coming from countries in which there had been no case. You can eliminate those ones. There were those who had been more than 14 days. You can eliminate those ones. That gives you a pool of persons who, again, we believe that we have to test. They have their full database because of the data that was taken at the airport, etc., and where they've been in the last 10, 12 or so days. Those who've been in town under 14 days before the mandatory quarantine started. That becomes another cohort. And then, fourthly, we're going to what we call active surveillance. So if we find a case, let's say here at 3555 Anofa Street, within this neighborhood, some active surveillance suggests that the public health officials should go around and do some testing. So what next after 2 weeks? 2 weeks gives us an opportunity to do this very aggressive surveillance and testing. And then depending on the outcome of what we find, we're able to make a clear determination that indeed we have succeeded in containing it, or that some other consequential measures need to be taken. Let me quickly move to the second one.
Before you quickly move to the second one, let's welcome our radio audience. Good evening and a warm welcome to the lockdown. It's a COVID-19 pandemic special, and it's a special coverage where we're giving you the opportunity to ask all questions related to the restrictions that were announced by the president starting at 1 a.m. Monday morning. A number of you have a number of questions that you're seeking answers to, and the Information Minister, Kojo Ponkroma, is here with us. Also, Radio WA 92.1 FM is also live, also on Love 99.5 FM in Kumasi, also live. Now on Joy 99.7 FM, there's a similar show also on Adum TV and all our Akan platforms, where the Deputy Information Minister, Pius Hajide, is also with my colleague Jerry Justice, giving you that opportunity to do so in Akan as well. So we've been taking some of your questions, a number of videos that you've sent in already. If you've just joined us on radio, you can also send yours via WhatsApp WhatsApp. For radio is 0244340437. You can send your questions via WhatsApp. Also on our social media platforms. Just leave it there and we'll pick it shortly. So a number of questions are coming already. 2 weeks, what's next? Mr. Information Minister has already giving us answers to that. Now we're moving on to those who have moved from Accra as a result of the announcement of the restriction.
So in all the restrictions and the decisions that have been made so far, you have to strike a good balance. You don't have to overreact and you don't have to underreact. So it's a good balance. The question becomes, as you're going to impose restrictions, do you give people room to prepare themselves for it? And if you give room for people to prepare themselves for it, what are the risk elements? The risk elements include the fact that some persons would have left the Greater Accra region. But it is a calculated risk because there are also other persons who have come into the region before you announce the restriction, who you cannot lock up right there and then, but you probably have to give an opportunity for them also to egress. So it's a calculated risk. Now, what has happened is that in the first cohorts I've spoken about, of the contact tracing and their clarity of who they need to trace, if any of these persons is outside the Greater Accra regional or the Greater Kumasi regional jurisdiction because of this, the program has been to have teams to even trace outside Greater Accra and Greater Kumasi. So the teams that are responsible for the tracing and testing are not just limited to Greater Accra and Greater Kumasi. They are also in the other regions. Police, military, public health, epidemiologists, etc., have also been designated with the right kit, etc., outside these regions so that they will be able to do primarily the contact tracing of persons. And then if you have some active surveillance in the neighborhoods, they will also be able to do some tracing there. Because for where we are now, it's test, test, test. If we had 1 million test kits, you test 1 million people. That's the way you can go after the virus and not wait for people to pop up and show up. But what we have also been saying is that for people in communities where people have moved in the last 24 hours, people have left Accra, people have left Kumasi, we continue to mention to you that do not forget about the principles of social distancing, at least 1 meter apart, especially for these persons who have come from outside the Greater Accra jurisdiction. Secondly, or the Greater Kumasi jurisdiction. Secondly, you need to ensure that local health authorities, and in every one of these areas, you have a CHIPS compound somewhere there. We need to provide information to them. My cousin just came from Accra. My cousin just came from Kumasi and its environs, so that we all assist in observing. It's not like they are harmful, dangerous people, but we all need to be aware of our situation in which we are, so that people who may exhibit some symptoms, etc., have an opportunity to be screened. So these persons are the local CHIPS compound, etc., their regular temperature, etc., being tracked. If social distancing is practiced, if any one of them has a condition, then it doesn't spread it, and it can also be quickly contained in these places. Finally, what we are doing is that we're also deploying a lot of technology to help us track people. So from the contact tracing point of view, if any of these persons are outside or have gone outside the jurisdiction, through the technology, we're also able to reach out to them on their mobile phones and request them to avail themselves to assist in this period. What we must be mindful of is the kind of stigmatization. It's not like something that when you get, you are going to die tomorrow morning. A lot of people, indeed the majority of people, recover. Some even without knowing they've had symptoms. So people should feel free and open, not to hide information or hide people, but let it be known to the authorities so that they can help these persons who may have contracted it.
Well, there was also a question about whether if you are in Dansoman control, for instance, you can move to Dansoman market and
how far is too far?
How far is too far? That's the question.
Yeah. Let's go back. Ideally, the order is stay at home. The president, I think in one of his quotes, says that the battlefront is at your door. The more you step out, the more you expose yourself to potential contraction of this virus. Indeed, all of us who are running around up and down, you are doing your job to serve the country, we are running, we are all putting ourselves at risk. So you don't need to put yourself at risk because MFI is doing the job for you. So stay home as much as possible. Okay. If you need to come out, it must be for an essential service. And I noticed you went through some of those essential services. Even for those ones, we encourage that it be in your local area. For want of a better expression, we'll say your electoral area, your small electoral, your neighborhood. Okay. Just your neighborhood. If I'm here and I'm just going to go on the street to buy cocoa tomorrow morning or wache right here at the junction.
But I don't like this wache. I like the wache at Labone.
We are not in ordinary times. You have to like this wache. Okay. If for some reason you have to step out, well, you have to. Because what we do not want is people to be using these exceptions as reasons now to be moving from Dansoman to Tema. And at every stop he says, I'm going to buy wache or something. And that is why the security persons, apart from the outer perimeter, they'll also be doing patrols. So they'll become familiar with the community in which they are. And therefore, when you say you're going to buy wache or cocoa right in front of your house or something, they know what you are talking about. So as much as possible, it is in your own interest to stay at home. And if for some exempt reason you have to step out, let it be within your neighborhood, not more than your electoral area. And I'll give you an example. When we started the mandatory quarantine, we had people who wanted to come in and smuggle their family members out. Some agitating, in fact, some getting on the balcony. Some of our colleagues in mandatory quarantine getting on the balconies and congregating and seeking to maybe agitate or something. They later found out that as they were doing that, they were exposing themselves to one another, some of who were testing positive. So it is in your own, all the decisions the president has taken is in our interest. So if we say stay at home, please stay at home. If you have to step out, not more than your neighborhood, not far or further than your electoral area, so that we can contain this.
Okay, so we'll try and then answer the questions quickly so we can take as many questions as possible. We have thousands of them, so we'll try to go through as many as possible.
Well,